5 of the Best is an opinion-based series on films which I have seen released during the chosen year. This is to celebrate previous years in film, not to cause any offence. All opinions are my own. Hi everyone, welcome to 5 of the Best, a series in which we celebrate movies year by year. This series of videos will consist of me discussing my 5 favourite films of this chosen year. And this year we're talking about the year 2006, so let's get started. Before we get into our top 5, here are a few of the honourable mentions for this year. Blood Diamond, Tenacious D in the Pick of Destiny, Children of Men, Deja Vu, and The Pursuit of Happiness. Now, let's get on to the list and start with number 5. 300 is directed by Zack Snyder and stars Gerard Butler and Lena Headey. So if you've been on the channel for a while, you'll know that I am not exactly the biggest Zack Snyder fan, but I do feel that he has some redeemable films. Things like his version of the Justice League have been pretty good in recent years, but then he has also films like Army of the Dead that I really can't say I absolutely adore in any way, and quite the opposite. And that's usually for Zack Snyder. He falls a bit into the Michael Bay category. They're quite similar in that way, where they have their greats and they have their really not so goods is probably the nicest way I could put it, and there's quite a disparity between the two. And while a large portion of Zack Snyder's work I would certainly classify as stinkers, I do have to say that something like 300 is definitely... It'd be hard to argue that 300 isn't his best outing as a director. And 300 is a wonderful film in the regard of what it achieves. Is it the best told story ever? It's not. Is it the best action film? No. But what it is, it has something I say quite a lot in these videos. It has the feeling. It has this... You're hooked very early into the film. And while it does take a little bit to get going, once you're in, you're in. And you're rooting so hard for these 300. And not only that, the performances, and led by Gerard Butler, who is an actor that I think this is his first actual appearance on 5 of the Best. I know he's probably appeared in a few honourable mentions. He's an actor that is a bit like Zack Snyder. Some good, some not so good in his career. And I suppose that would apply to a lot of actors. But Gerard Butler, when he is good, he is great. And in this, he is great. Him as Leonidas, I should say, is one of the... He's one of the true warriors of film. Does that even make sense? I don't think so. But you get what I mean. He's one of those kings that you want to root for. Is he the best king in film? He's absolutely not either. But 300 is a film that I found myself really engaged to. I didn't think... I mean, I'll admit this wasn't a film I seen at the time. It was one I actually seen a good bit after, a few years after it was released. And when I did get back to it, I know a lot of people absolutely adore 300, and while I do understand its value, I can't say I love it the same way that everybody does, or a large portion of the audience that's seen it really adored this film. I like 300 a lot. I think it achieves a lot, but it is not a film that I would classify as the true epic of kind of prehistoric war, if that makes sense. Kind of sword and shield battle, if that's the correct term for it. But something I do want to mention that actually might be my favourite element of the film and really does build up that intrigue as the film goes and adds to the story so well. And I say this about when I do mention it's the score of 300. And when I mention score in film, score is always there to benefit the story. And sometimes it works a good bit, sometimes it's just middle of the road. But something in 300, I feel the score is brilliant. The score really does add to these epic battle scenes, these kind of slow motion music building tension, and it really is something that is achieved well. And I think as a director, for Zack Snyder, to give him credit, I would say that's something he does well when he's in the right scenario and he's given the right scenario, one that works well with him. In a lot of scenarios and a lot of directorial movies that he's done or directorial outings for movies he's done, there has been parts where you can tell he's not the right director in the right part. Now maybe that's not his fault, but that's another day or another discussion for another day. But for Zack Snyder, I think that 300 stands at the top of his list. There's a few that maybe come close, but I would say, for me personally, at this moment, there's still time. Still time. I'm sure there's things that maybe will eclipse. If Zack Snyder has a real renaissance of his career, there may be something that eclipses 300 on his list of movies. But for the minute, 300 stands at the top. It's iconic with a lot of its moments. His performances from Jared Butler and Lena Headey in particular are great. And it's one of those kind of... Would you class it as a cult film? I don't think you would. I think it's more of a memeable film. You know, this is Sparta. Everybody's seen that. That was one of maybe the original internet memes at the time. It has its place in history, 300. Is it the best film of all time? It's not. But is it an absolute great of cinema? It's certainly close to that. Let's move on to the next one. Number 4. Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest is directed by Gore Verbinski and stars Johnny Depp, Orlando Bloom, Keira Knightley and Bill Nighy. So with the first Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, already appearing on 5 of the Best, it was inevitable that at least one of the other ones would appear in some form. And with Dead Man's Chest, there's a point where, with the first film being as truly wonderful as it is, and I will say straight off the bat that Dead Man's Chest and At World's End, the 2 of the final trilogy, and this is where you say, but there's 4 and 5? No, there's not. No, there's not. There is 3 films in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. We did not get it drawn out by the studio just for money. We have 3 great films in a great trilogy. And Dead Man's Chest builds wonderfully on Curse of the Black Pearl, because Curse of the Black Pearl works brilliantly as one film. From where it starts and where it ends, you can leave it there. It's a great one film outing. But then Dead Man's Chest brings into the story so well, adds so much to the characters, adds more depth to the characters, and it builds the overall connection that the audience has to all of these characters. Not just Captain Jack Sparrow, but people like Elizabeth Swann, played by Keira Knightley, and Orlando Bloom's character, Bill Turner. But when we're talking about cast, I want to talk about a new addition that comes in Dead Man's Chest, and it is probably one of the most underrated CGI characters of the past 20 years, and that's Davy Jones, played and voiced by Bill Nighy. And then the addition of his character, not only that, but the score that accompanies him, the atmosphere when he's on screen, the interactions and the chemistry that he has with characters like Orlando Bloom's character Bill Turner, his father in this that's introduced, Bootstrap Bill Turner, played by Stellan Skarsgård, who is also wonderful in this, and then the continuing chemistry and charisma that Captain Jack has with everybody, and Johnny Depp in probably his most iconic role. I mean, that's up for debate with the amount of characters he played over the years, but I think, if you're being honest, Captain Jack Sparrow for Johnny Depp is the most memorable one, and the most recognisable one. And in addition to the wonderful performances throughout this that carry through from the first film all the way through to the third film for a lot of these characters, something that I did mention a bit when I talked about Curse of the Black Pearl, but I want to emphasise again, the amazing visuals throughout this film and these early Pirates of the Caribbean films are truly wonderful. The wide open sea landscape, it encapsulates the essence of this film. These giant amazing ships sailing through vast open plains of water, and if you can't tell, I'm not a boat guy, so I don't even know if that's the right term. Is it plains of water? Fields of water? Waters of water? Anyway, what am I talking about? But these giant masterpiece ships, things like the Black Pearl in the film, or the Flying Dutchman, Davy Jones's ship, and the way that them sailing through, it's the ship, it's the water, and it's the score, and the atmosphere and the feeling for the audience through those. It's so well done, and that's something I have to credit Gore Verbinski a lot for in his directorial chops for this, because what he achieves in all 3 of these films, and you're probably saying, why don't I focus more on Dead Man's Chest? It's hard to, because a lot of the elements that is so good about all of these 3 films, and again, I'm gonna continue to say that, because 4 and 5 are such a drop in quality, so many characters are not there, and basically, it's just They just decided to pay Johnny Depp enough to come back and get 2 more movies thrown out for money. That's what the last 2 films are. It's such a shame, because you have such a wonderful trilogy here. And Dead Man's Chest is absolutely... it's a brilliant continuation. As I said already, Curse of the Black Pearl, I'd have been happy if just one film that's great. But while Dead Man's Chest slightly pales in comparison to the quality of the first film, it's a wonderful sequel. It's a brilliant sequel, and what it does is it extends the story into what can be the second and third film, and it keeps you engaged throughout, and it's just so wonderful. The performances are as good as they were in Curse of the Black Pearl. The script is as tight-knit. It's just some of the plot details are slightly... If you're talking about rewatches, everybody goes and rewatches Curse of the Black Pearl. But if you're going to rewatch Pirates of the Caribbean, you would watch the 3. And watching Dead Man's Chest, some of the set pieces, especially near the end, were not any kind of spoilers, but there's a lot of kind of battle scenes on this island near the end. And it's something very memorable. It sticks in my head when I think of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise as a whole, the good and the bad. And it's something that it puts a smile on my face. And Pirates of the Caribbean is a great, great trilogy. And I just try to take away. I tried to take away what the studio couldn't. The studio couldn't keep... They had enough money from the first 3 films, but they thought, no, let's milk this cow dry. Let's beat this dead horse until it's completely gone. And I heard through the grapevine they're going to be making another one, which is shameful. But not to get bogged down with what the franchise ended up being by the end. Talking about Dead Man's Chest overall, as a sequel and as a film, it is wonderful. It takes a lot of the stuff that you loved from the first film, it builds on characters, it adds to the overall wealth and overall quality of what Pirates of the Caribbean and its early iterations are. It's a brilliant follow-up, it's a brilliant continuation of the story, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone. Number 3. The Prestige. It's directed by Christopher Nolan and stars Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale, Michael Caine and Scarlett Johansson. So when I'm talking about a film and I see directed by Christopher Nolan, I think that has become such a staple of film nowadays, where when you see Christopher Nolan's name attached to any project, you go, okay, I'm in. Doesn't matter what the project is, doesn't matter what the story is, doesn't matter what the cast is. He's at such a level now, and he's such a wonderful director, and his stock is so high that whatever it is, you just go, before you hear it's being directed by Christopher Nolan, okay, I'll go for it. Yeah, book my ticket, I'm going to see that. What's it about? Doesn't care. Doesn't matter, I'm in. But take this back a bit, because obviously we're in the year of 2006, and with Batman Begins being released in 2005, and it being a brilliant start to the Batman trilogy that he directed, the Nolan Dark Knight trilogy as it's known. This is prior to the Dark Knight, and I think for a lot of people, the Dark Knight is really where Christopher Nolan is like, okay, this guy is top of his craft. This is the guy that we want directing all the big time stuff. The things he went on and directed after this, things like Inception, things like Interstellar. These are the things that they came after the Nolan trilogy. And he certainly has a few good ones, great ones under his repertoire before these films. And one of them, actually, if I'm talking what are his best films that aren't the Dark Knight trilogy, as I mentioned, things like Interstellar, things like Inception. But something that I find with Christopher Nolan is, we have things like Tenet as well. There's the good and the bad, because Tenet was a film that I think goes too smart too early, and actually for what Tenet does wrong, and while I didn't hate Tenet too much, I thought it played its audience, it made every audience member think that they were stupid. I found that it was a film that was a lot smarter than it actually was, whereas to talk about The Prestige, directed by him a long time ago, what was that be? That would be 14 years prior. The Prestige actually tells a very smartly crafted tale about 2 illusionists or magicians that it's just, on a very base level, it is a one-upmanship film. It is 2 competing magicians who want to be the best. Simple as that. It is on a very base level. It is as surface level filmmaking. It's that, but on that premise, you would think, okay, well, there's not a whole lot to build on there. But oh my God, is there? Because what you have in The Prestige is so much prestige. You have Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman giving unbelievably good performances in this at moments, not from start to finish, I'll admit, and it's not like the two greatest performances by them in anything, but I think that the charm, the charisma, the interactions they bring with each other, and then you've got different characters, or actually different standout acting performances by, you've got, you know, Andy Serkis is in here giving a good job. You've got Michael Caine, who always is great, and obviously has that Christian Bale tie-in. You know, he's working with him on the Nolan Dark Knight trilogy at the same time, so it was clear the inspiration to put these two actors again together with Christian Bale and Michael Caine. But actually, an acting performance that is really surprising in this is David Bowie. David Bowie, God rest his soul, is actually one of the best parts of this film. He stars as Nikola Tesla, and it's something that I find really, really engaging, because there's a section in the film when they go to speak, or when a character goes to speak with him, and actually David Bowie might be the most intriguing character in the entire film, and he portrays it so well. And when in a film stacked with great performances, to have David Bowie, primarily I know he's had a few acting roles over the years, and some good, some bad, you know, but this is brilliant from him. And it really goes, I know a lot of people do commend him for this, and I'm going to be right there with people. I think that David Bowie in this was a real surprise and a real shock when you say that David Bowie was in a Christopher Nolan film and was actually one of the better parts of the film. You've got to say fair play. You've got to say fair play to Mr. Bowie. But yeah, the performances in this film, the Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale, they're the heartbeat of the film. They're competition with each other. The way they bounce off, the way they interact with each other, again, I say it again, the surface level one-upmanship that's told so well. It's a film that keeps you locked in because you want to see. And actually, it's not like these two characters are the most rootable. You know, you're not rooting for these characters per se. You're not picking one and going, he's my favourite, no, he's my favourite. You know, it's not a, you know, there's not a hero and villain per se. There is it's one of the more unique dynamics for something that could be very, you know, normal. It could be a very normal, here's our hero, here's our villain, this is who you're supposed to be rooting for, who you're not supposed to like. And actually in this film, you go on a journey with the film, and I think that any good film takes you on a whirlwind of emotions. There's, you know, twists, you're thrown this way and that, as are some of the characters in the film, and it's just a wonderfully told film. And I think that while I would admit that Christopher Nolan has had better outings than this, and probably will continue to have better outings than this, I think The Prestige is one of his maybe underrated films. I say underrated, it's like the top 50 rated IMDb movies of all time. People love this film, as do I. I would recommend Prestige to anyone. And actually, the real magic is the film itself. That was cheesy, I'll admit that. But yeah, The Prestige is great. Number 2. The Departed is directed by Martin Scorsese and stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, Mark Wahlberg, Martin Sheen, Ray Winston, and Vera Farmiga. Now, when I start any movie on 5 of the best and I say it's directed by such and such and such, it depends who it is, and you know, you see a lot of regulars on this. But whenever you hear the name Martin Scorsese, probably, I mean, he is the best director. It is ever. It is ever at this point. I don't think many people argue with that anymore. The diversity of what he's done through so many decades, it's really he's just the undisputed best. I think a lot of actors have a lot, and there's maybe a few that push him close, but I just think Martin Scorsese just has such a repertoire of films at this point. And when it comes to talking about The Departed is a film that, if you look at the description, I'm reading the IMDb description now, and it's an undercover cop and a mole in the police attempt to identify each other while infiltrating an Irish gang in South Boston. So you think of that and you think, okay, so it's a cop drama. And any kind of cop drama mixed with gangsters and mafia side of things, there's only one director that truly does it to the point of absolute perfection, and that is Martin Scorsese. I feel there's been some wonderful moments. I've already mentioned Five of the Best, a film like Training Day, which is a great cop drama. But The Departed is a film that, I mean, I've just read you the list of people in this. The quality of actors and actresses in this is, it actually shouldn't be. It should be illegal to have this much quality in one film. You should have 2 or 3 main big stars that with real top tier actors and acting performances, and then a few side characters. There is so much talent in this film. It is bursting, and even before you read a script or you see a minute of the movie, you hear who's in it, and you go, oh my, okay, right, well, I'm very much intrigued by this film. And I have to be honest, guys, this is a film that, while I had heard from so many people its real quality, it is a film I actually only seen pretty recently. And it's a film that I went into with obviously high expectations. So for them to be met, it would really have to have delivered on all the promises that I've heard from people, and just general discussion when it comes to talking about The Departed. People put it on the highest of praise. IMDb has a rating of 8.5, so it really... and that's there's 1.3 million people have rated it that, or over 1.3 million people. You know what I mean? There's 8.5 as the rating. So it's a film that certainly comes in with a before I had seen the film, I seen that a lot of people liked it, or loved it, or adored it. There's not many that said this is not very good. Let's put it that way. So I watched The Departed, and this film is unbelievable. It is so good. There's going to be a lot of adjectives used to describe this film. It's a film that it has the central dynamic in this film for a cop drama, or any drama for that matter. And I'm going to use the favourite phrase. Can you guess it? Can you guess what I'm going to say? This is a constantly engaging film. But I always say this, I say that films are constantly engaging from start to finish, and in a cop drama that has to be the case. But the reason that The Departed has it so perfectly, because the script is fantastic. I honestly have no words to describe how good. Well, I'll try and put it into words, but there's something about. Okay, so the reason this film is so good is because it is so parallel, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Leonardo DiCaprio's character and Matt Damon's character start at the same point in the film. They make a very noticeable point that these characters are on the same path, but to a point in the film they are. And then they're on the same course, they stay on the same course, but to show the good and evil, and a good and a bad side, is not what this film does. It starts by portraying the evil underworld of the Boston mafia and gangs and things like that, headed up by Jack Nicholson, who we'll get to in a minute, my god. And then you've got Matt Damon, who's so it's Leonardo DiCaprio is in that side, and Matt Damon is in the good cop, let's say that, side of Martin Sheen and Mark Wahlberg, and that's his role in this. So they're all working on the same, what would you say? They're all trying to achieve the same goal. And on the outset you might say, okay, well, that sounds like pretty standard cop drama to an extent. You have the good cop, you have the bad cop, you have the undercover cop, and you have the interest is there to see both sides. And that there's a lot of cop dramas that do that and do that well, and that's absolutely right. But what this does is it turns everything you expect to happen on its head. This is a film that goes 1,000,000 miles an hour. Never mind 100 miles an hour, because it's a film that you, as the audience, and the characters in the film feel like they're 10 steps behind what's happening. So you as the audience, if you're latching on to a few characters in this and you're trying to use them as guidance to really grasp what is happening and who the situation is, who is this and who is that, and what role does each person really play in this, it's the definition of a constantly engaging film. And I don't say that lightly, because there's a films that, I say that if you're watching the channel a lot, that's a term I use a lot for these films. But The Departed is one of the, if not the best example of a film that starts at 100 miles an hour and ends at 1,000 miles an hour. It is so good. And Martin Scorsese, just to go back to him, some wonderful directing traits that he would have in a lot of films and shows in a lot of films. But what this film is, and it's a word I don't use very often to describe films, it feels claustrophobic. It feels claustrophobic because there's a point where every character, actually I say a point, it's a lot of it, apart from the characters in power, the people who are at the top of each side, at the top of the police service and the top of the mafia, they don't feel claustrophobic. But the ones underneath them, the pawns, if you like, in this chess game that the police and the mafia turf war that they're having, you feel uneasy and unnerving because they feel it's a real audience actor connection through that, and that really it does come across well. And that's something that, to have such a connection to the characters, especially from the minute go, it isn't like a lot of cop dramas that take maybe an hour for you to be like, okay, well, I know who he is, I know who he's tied to. This film, you get a lot of information early, but not to the point where you know anything. As I say, for a lot of this, you feel like you know nothing. You feel like you've watched the whole film, or maybe the 3/4 of the film, and you feel like you know less about what's going on. And but at the same time, you're constantly wanting to learn. And it's like it's like having a toy for a dog, and as soon as the dog goes to bite the toy, you pull it away last minute. That's what this film does. This film gives you the toy and goes, no, you're not having that just yet. And eventually you give in and you give the dog the toy, and that's how it feels in the ending. And I won't, of course, not to spoil any endings, because if there's a film I want you to see, this is definitely one of the ones I would recommend to the highest degree. The Departed is a brilliant film, guys. Brilliant film. It is everything. If people have said it, they hype it up. They hype it up rightly, because I hype it up, if you can't tell, myself. It is a film that I find was everything that I wanted it to be, and more. When I heard the name Scorsese, I seen Leo DiCaprio, I see Matt Damon, I see Jack Nicholson. There we go. We're going to end this on Jack Nicholson. And what a man, and what an actor. We're talking about Hollywood royalty here, and Jack Nicholson, one of the best to ever do it. I mean, some truly wonderful performances in his career. I mean, do I need to list them off? You know them. It's Jack Nicholson, for God's sake. But this is one of his best. It's maybe not as iconic as something like The Shining or even A Few Good Men. But oh my God, he is so good in this. He is so good in this. And him paired with Ray Winston is a connection I never thought I would ever need. But oh my God, talk about a match made in heaven. Ray Winston and Jack Nicholson. Oh, that is just... it's amazing how good that is, and fair play to the casters for this film, because they did a hell of a job. And to get all these actors, I know Leo wasn't... maybe Leo DiCaprio and Matt Damon weren't as top stars as they certainly are now. And certainly Mark Wahlberg as well. Mark Wahlberg's another one. And he certainly plays the bad cop and the very hateable cop in this film, but he plays that wonderfully. And Mark Wahlberg is not someone I can say I would have the highest opinion of when it comes to acting. He has had some absolute stinkers, but for him to be in here and to very much hold his own, that says a lot. And maybe his career isn't... I think for one brilliant Mark Wahlberg performance, there's about 8 bad ones, and that's a shame. And I know sometimes I describe that for a lot of actors and actresses, but I think that just seems to be how it is. And I know this was probably early into when he was really getting into becoming the acting mainstay that he is now. But you just see what would blossom in later years for Leo DiCaprio with, I mean, what is there to say about Leo DiCaprio? Matt Damon, I mean, is just some wonderful performances, and this is just a great example of it. And they're dynamic with these kind of legendary actors like Martin Sheen, Jack Nicholson. Like, I just, what a film! What a film! I could keep talking. Another performance I want to say just before I go: Vera Farmiga, known quite well now for her role in the Conjuring series, where she plays a very different character in that. I think she is brilliant in this film as well, and she very much holds her own with the very male-dominated acting talent in this. She plays Madeline, the kind of guidance counsellor for the police in this, and she plays a wonderful role. And her, I was very. It might be my favourite performances of her. As I say, she's probably more iconic for the Conjuring roles and a few other. It's a lot of it's horror related, but her in a real cop drama absolutely knocks it out of the park. So that's Departed. Departed is a film that I would recommend to you. I could talk for another 20 minutes about how much I love this film, but I just want you to see it. I don't want to spoil anything. It's 2.5 hours, but once you get in, oh my god, you're in. You're locked in, and you will not leave your seat to to see what happens in this film. So I would very much recommend The Departed. However, it's not my favourite film of 2006, because my favourite film is number 1. Casino Royale. It's directed by Martin Campbell and stars Daniel Craig, Eva Green, Judi Dench and Mads Mikkelsen. So from the outset, I want to say that I am not the biggest James Bond fan. Admittedly, my knowledge of Bond extends really just to Daniel Craig and slightly into the Pierce Brosnan eras of Bond. I am not one of these people that has been a long-time lover of the franchise, dedicated to maybe has their own favourite Bond that they remember from 20 or 30 years ago that they adore. It's not a franchise that I live and die by any means. But something, and I mentioned this when I spoke about, No Time to Die, in my initial thoughts video for that in 2021, that James Bond is a franchise that I understand the love. I understand the fact that so many people adore the character, adore the different iterations, the different stories, but actually, something that when I talk about Casino Royale, and Casino Royale, I'll start by saying, is my favourite James Bond film. And you might say, well, you haven't seen that many. And I agree. Admittedly, I have not seen that many, and there might be others, maybe from the 60s or the 70s, or however long this has been running, maybe some of the Sean Connery ones, or Roger Moore that I might watch and go, okay, I actually prefer that. But at this current moment in time, and for the ones that I have seen, the whole of Daniel Craig's Bond time, and slightly into Pierce Brosnan's time, I find that Casino Royale is far and away my favourite Bond film. And not to the point where it is unbelievably better than things like Skyfall and No Time to Die, which I think are the other two great outings by Daniel Craig. Admittedly, Spectre and Quantum of Solace were not such a dip in quality. It was kind of, and I mentioned this again in that video when I talked about No Time to Die, it's kind of 3 good, 2 bad for Daniel Craig. But for a first outing to be as solid as Casino Royale, Daniel Craig should definitely be commended for what he brings, and the engagement, the Bond charisma that he brings from kind of his first scene. The first scene at the start of this film, that if you've seen the film, the kind of black and white noir style. It's just such a wonderful introduction, because it says so much by also leaving so much in mystery. And that's what it does so well, and as this Bond film goes, we learn actually very little about Craig's Bond. But something that I found so wonderful about this film, and actually it's a strange critique, but I love the parts that make it not a Bond film, if you get what I mean. Because yes, it has all the Bond gunfighting and all the very maybe cliche to an extent of what you would expect for a Bond film, in a good way, of course. You know, the scene at the start of the film where the kind of crane chase is wonderful. Obviously the shootouts and everything you would expect, the Bond girl dynamic, everything. You know, the conversation with M and Judi Dench being wonderful as she always is in these films. But my favourite part of this, personally, is actually the parts that take it away from being a Bond film and make it unique. The fact that it actually is a gambling film. It's kind of a high-stakes gambling poker film at its core. But then it has different dynamics. Like there's a heist element to it. There's obviously the undercover side of things, the stealth dynamic with obviously the heroes and the villains. There is so much to love in Casino Royale, and there's so many layers to it. And I don't think in any of the Bond films that I've seen, and while I certainly did love Skyfall and No Time to Die as well from Bond, or for Daniel Craig's Bond, I find that they were very much part of a larger story. Whereas Casino Royale, when I go back and watch Casino Royale, it is a film that has the rewatchability. It's not a big overarching story. There is some elements that maybe bleed into the following films, as you know, with it being the first of 5 for Daniel Craig. But I find that the stuff that make it unique and the stuff that make it rewatchable. I mean, I rewatched this and Skyfall going in to see No Time to Die in 2021, and I remember thinking to myself, I wonder, do I love Skyfall now more? And while Skyfall is absolutely wonderful, I'm sure it'll make some kind of appearance on 5 of the best, I find that Casino Royale actually is not only one of my favourite Bond films, actually no, sorry, that not only is it my favourite Bond film, it's actually one of my favourite action films. Plus you've got, and this is something that I have to bring up, Mads Mikkelsen as Le Chiffre is a brilliant villain. So many classic scenes with him, so many iconic, you know, them sitting around the poker table, him torturing him. Mads Mikkelsen is an underrated actor. I don't care what anyone says. And does he get the big roles nowadays? Yes, he does. Yes, he does. He's in a lot of big things. But I feel that Mads Mikkelsen is not talked about enough. He is wonderful in nearly everything I see, whether it's a good film or a bad film. If Mads Mikkelsen is in it, he is wonderful. He always brings so much to any character he plays. And I feel that the Chief, the villain in this, is probably his best performance ever. Well, maybe to date is probably the better way to put that, because I would imagine and I hope that bigger films that they just see his skill when it comes to acting, when it comes to playing these kind of... He has such an intrigue as a character, whether he's a good or a bad character, whether he is a good or a bad hero or villain, he is always engaging. He's always a character you're like, oh my god, like, I need to learn more about this guy, no matter who he plays. And that's something that I really think is so wonderful. And another performance that I have to mention is Eva Green as Vesper in this film. And her as Vesper is probably... Actually, no, I'm going to say yes, but obviously, again, I'm not too versed to know these classic performances in the 60s and 70s, 80s, whatever. Eva Green is my favourite Bond girl, and my favourite Bond girl performance. Because while she is obviously stunning in this film, there's no doubt about that, but she one-ups Daniel Craig's James Bond in a lot of this film. She's the brains for a lot of this. She's someone that I find her so good, and what an addition to this film. And I have to admit, I haven't really seen her in too lot after this. I mean, I seen her in the sequel to Sin City, which wasn't a lot to write home about. I seen her in the sequel to 300, which wasn't a lot to write home about. But her in this, unbelievable. It is so good. And actually, all the performance. I mean, I could keep going through just each performance. But let's talk about Daniel Craig, the main man. Daniel Craig, for a first outing, and I said this again earlier. I said he is wonderful as James Bond. He is so easy. It's so easy to will him to win. It's so easy to want Daniel. And this, I talked about the first scene, but kind of, see, by the first hour, he is your Bond. For you know, you're like, okay, well that's it. It doesn't matter how many films he does. I think I'm in. And whether, you know, even in the stinkers, the Quantum of Solace, the Spectre, and while Spectre isn't the most awful film, Quantum of Solace is pretty bad, but Spectre isn't too bad. But in all 5 films, Daniel Craig's doing a good job. A good to great job. And in Casino Royale, for a first outing, and I've said that about 5 times now, for a first outing, it is brilliant what he achieves. Brilliant what he achieved. The storytelling, the dynamic between the characters, the instantly iconic scenes from him. He has his Bond scenes, and when you know, if you think in 10, 20 years when they're doing a sizzle reel of Daniel Craig's tenure of James Bond, a lot of his most iconic iconic moments as this character in film is from this outing. There will be certainly some moments from Skyfall, certainly some moments from No Time to Die, but so much of the iconic points of his tenure as Bond is from this first film. Casino Royale is a wonderful film. And you might be thinking to yourself, Casino Royale above The Departed and The Prestige? I'm surprised too, because this is a really strong year. Because if you're talking about The Departed and The Prestige, and then neither of them are getting the first one, that shows how much I love this film. And for it to be not, for myself to not be a die-hard Bond fan and put Casino Royale above those 2 films, that shows the quality I think that Casino Royale has. Wonderful, wonderful film. A great year overall, and that's why Casino Royale is my number 1. So that's 2006. A really good year, as I mentioned just as I was tailing off there talking about Casino Royale. Really good year. Really good year. While it wasn't a year that was stacked in the sense of, you know, there was about 15 honourable mentions, that's not the case. But what we had was a really good set of films. And as it's something I always mention or try to mention in these videos is, was there any that from the honourable mentions that were close to breaking into the top 5? I think there was 2. I think Blood Diamond and Children of Men had the potential to pip that 5th spot over 300. Because there are 3 films that I kind of put as interchangeable. I think they're all great for what they are. Blood Diamond obviously has some great... I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio, fantastic in that. Children of Men, Clive Owen. Oh, him and Children of Men. But I think for what 300 is, and obviously what I said when I talked about it as my number 5, I found that 300 just pipped it for, I think, maybe more the iconic side of things. You know, it's more the... Sadly, you know, in some ways, because Blood Diamond and Children of Men have their legacy in film, but 300 is certainly, if you're talking about the more memorable films, and it just has some great things, I feel that 300 deserved to be on the top 5 at least. The other films, Deja Vu, great, but it wasn't bringing in the top 5. Pursuit of Happiness, one of my favourite Will Smith performances for sure, but it wasn't getting into the top 5. Tenacious D, it's great for what it is. It just is. You know, Tenacious D is such a fun comedy film. It's kind of more... It's probably along the level of a cult film in some ways, but again, it was never breaking into the top 5. A strong 5 this year. And as I say, there was a few that were able to... Would maybe have snuck the 5th spot there, but, you know, 3, 2 and 1, The Prestige, The Departed and Casino Royale might be 3 of the strongest we've had on the 5 of the best so far. It's you know, a real stacked top heavy year. You know, 3, 2 and 1, all 3 of them could have been 1, and in other years they probably would have been. There's other years, you know, that had... I would say The Prestige is probably top of some other years because it's so good, and it was 3 on this and I did change those a few times, but whenever I went into talking about 2006, I knew for sure that Casino Royale was going to be my number 1. I think Casino Royale is so good, so good, and if you haven't seen it, if you're not a Bond person, I'm not really a Bond person, I've said that a few times, Casino Royale is a wonderful film, full stop. Doesn't need to be Bond, doesn't need to be anything. It's a great action film. It's all the things I said when I talked about it there. But yeah, that's 2006. A great year for what it is. 2007, it's next, and I'm telling you what, guys, 2007's it's a good year. So that'll be next month. As always, Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to me talking about some movies. And if you enjoy it, subscribe. You know what's there. These are every month. You know, we go year by year. So by the end of the year, we'll be into the 2010s, which I can't wait for. And certainly my knowledge on film really extends more as we pass 2010. Kind of from 2000 to 2009 is years that I just kind of got into loving films. But a lot of these films are films I went back and watched at a later date. So as we get into 2010 and onwards, these are films I have a real emotional attachment to. Whereas a lot of these films I have attachment to, you know, the real brilliant ones and the kind of unmissable ones of the decade that is the 2000s. But into 2010, there's a lot more intrigue, I think, as we get there. But yeah, so 2007 is coming next month. Expect that. Lots more videos on the channel, you know that. They'll be there. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, let me know. And I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye, guys. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Before you go, here are some of my other videos. For updates and information on upcoming videos, the best place to find us is my Twitter. Much love, everyone.